Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma, and here's what's coming up tonight on the show. If you watch the news today, you must be wondering, what's happening in Europe? Why are leaders all the way in Bali talking about an incident in Poland? We've seen a series of statements, reactions, press conferences, a lot of effort to do damage control. But the damage was done last night. A missile hit Poland yesterday. 2 people were killed, and what followed was chaos and confusion. Remember, Poland is a NATO country. So where did the missile come from? What was the target? And here's the confusing part. Poland says the missile was a misfire, an accident from Ukrainian air defenses. And the NATO chief says that Russia bears the ultimate responsibility for the incident. So what's happening in Europe? On Gravitas tonight, we put the spotlight on NATO. What happened to NATO's air defense system and intelligence? Also on the show, Donald Trump has announced his 3rd straight presidential bid. This is a rare attempt by a former president to try to recapture the White House after losing an election. But America has changed, as has the American voter. He says that America's comeback starts right now. But does America want a Trump comeback? Meanwhile, Captain Khan is fielding controversy yet again. The Toshakhana or gifting row gets murkier as a Dubai-based businessman makes some huge claims. We'll discuss tonight on the show. And do you own the latest pair of headphones? Do you listen to music all day without a care in the world? Well, it's high time you start caring. On the show tonight, we'll analyze a new report which says that you risk losing your hearing if you continue to listen to music at unsafe levels. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's often considered to be one of the most feared military alliances in the world. Its treaty says an attack on one member equals an attack on all. Soon after we wrapped up our show last night, there was an attack on one such NATO member. A missile struck Poland. 2 people died. How did NATO react? With confusion, followed by a desperate attempt to turn around the story. Let's now take a look at the sequence of events. At 3:40 p.m. local time on the 15th of November, a missile fell on a Polish village. This is where it is located on the map, just 6 kilometers from Ukraine. The missile hit a grain drying facility.
Gdzieś tutaj stanąć po prostu, tak?
Now, eyewitnesses say that they heard a terrifying sound as the missile flew over the town. The force of the explosion shook windows. One farm worker was due to start his shift at 7 p.m. later that evening, and he says he could have been among those dead. The attack came at a time when Russian missiles were raining on Ukraine. It was one of the heaviest barrages of missiles to hit Ukraine since the start of the war. Goes without saying, Russia was the obvious suspect. Poland's foreign ministry was quick to put out a statement. It said the missile was Russian-made. The country's president, Andrzej Duda, also hinted at a Russian hand. Poland even summoned Russia's ambassador to Warsaw. The reaction was quick. But so was the U-turn. Take a look.
We do not have any conclusive evidence at the moment as to who launched this missile. We can say what happened was an isolated incident. Nothing, absolutely nothing indicates that this was an intentional attack on Poland. So what happened is a rocket hit our territory. It was not intentional. It was not a missile targeted at Poland. The fact is this was not an attack on Poland.
Chances are the missile never came from Russia. So who fired it? The NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says the missile was fired from Ukraine. It was a Ukrainian air defense missile. It was meant to hit a Russian rocket. Instead, it struck Poland.
Our preliminary analysis suggests that the incident was likely caused by a Ukrainian air defense missile fired to defend Ukrainian territory against Russian cruise missile attacks. But let me be clear, this is not Ukraine's fault.
But why is it not Ukraine's fault? And what was NATO's air defense system doing when the missile was heading towards Poland? You see, NATO has an integrated air and missile defense system. It is called NATO IAMD. The alliance claims that this defense system is prepared to address all kinds of threats, from tactical to strategic, from air, over land, or from the sea. But here, it failed to spot a missile being fired from a neighboring country. Of course, it was a misfire. But it did hit a NATO country. It killed 2 people. What did NATO members do about it? Let's get you some reactions now. The Pentagon reacted by saying it was not aware of any such attack. And soon, the US President Joe Biden began downplaying the entire incident. Listen in.
President, is it too early to say whether this missile was fired from Russia?
There is preliminary information that contests that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia, but we'll see.
One would have expected NATO members to go to town criticizing Russia. But that was opposite of what was happening in Bali on the last day of the G20 summit. There were some cautious remarks and no naming names. Any idea why? First, the uncomfortable issue of NATO's own air defense system. Second, in this case, the missile was fired from Ukraine, a country which NATO has been standing by firmly, even committing its air defense to. But here, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared to have no clue of what had happened. He issued a statement blaming Russia for the missile strike, even calling an attack on collective security and a significant escalation. Listen in.
Moreover, today happened what we were warning about for a long time. We said that terror is not confined to our state borders. It is already spreading to the territory of Moldova. And today, Russian missiles hit Poland. They hit the territory of a friendly nation and people were killed. To fire missiles at NATO territory, this is a Russian missile. This is a Russian missile attack on collective security. It's a significant escalation. Action is required.
Call it hope, confusion, or a communication void. Earlier today, NATO called an emergency meeting. The idea was to figure out how it would react. At least 2 alliance members called for strengthening the air defense on the NATO's eastern wing. This is the area I'm talking about. Countries like Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. You see, the war is happening in their backyard. And what happened in Poland is a reminder that any moment the war could breach NATO territory. Also a reminder that NATO may not be prepared for such a grim occasion. The strike in Poland has exposed NATO's military and communication lapse. And guess who's having a field day?
We ask Polish officials to be more restrained, balanced and professional when they are talking about such sensitive and potentially dangerous themes.
As the saga comes to an end, here's what NATO has concluded. 1. It needs to provide more air defense to Ukraine. And 2. Russia bears ultimately all responsibility. Those are the words of the NATO chief. In other words, Ukraine can misfire a missile. NATO's own defense system can fail. Civilians can die as a result. And it is all Russia's fault. The question is, what gives? Our next story is about the G20. The two-day summit has come to an end, and not without controversy, courtesy the blast in Poland. The G20 summit couldn't escape its shadow. In the early hours of Wednesday morning, reports of the explosion reached Indonesia and got many world leaders out of their beds. The image on your screen tells you the story. This is US President Joe Biden, sitting with his close aides, taking stock of the situation. Reports say he held an early morning call with the President of Poland to discuss the damages incurred. Another image shows the French President Emmanuel Macron heading into an emergency meeting early morning. Likewise, most G20 leaders huddled on the sidelines to discuss the incident and prepare their statements. Interestingly, shortly before the blast occurred, Russia bailed on the summit yet again. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov left the summit a day early and returned home. Why? No one knows. But media reports in Indonesia say that Lavrov's early departure was quote-unquote expected. The next day, like I said, ended up being mostly about the blast. Some world leaders present at the summit took turns to condemn Russia's alleged actions. Others decided to defend it by saying that Moscow was not responsible. The blame game done with, the summit then proceeded with some official engagements and some unofficial ceremonies. Like this one. Biden's visit to the Tahura mangrove forest. But just as he was climbing a staircase to the venue, he almost tripped, but was saved from a near fall by the Indonesian president, who grabbed Biden's right arm to stabilize him. The clip has gone viral. Biden's critics say this is yet another proof of how he's unfit to govern. Biden didn't go to the forest alone. He was accompanied by other leaders. They were seen planting saplings and taking a stroll through the forest reserve. This was an effort by the Indonesian government to showcase its commitment to climate initiatives. The formalities done with, the leaders then headed to finish their engagements. The first one was between India and France. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi met the French President and held talks on strengthening bilateral ties. This was followed by a series of quick and brief bilaterals. First, with the Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong. Then with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and then the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. All three meetings focused on strengthening bilateral cooperation. But the big highlight from the summit was this meeting between Prime Minister Modi and his British counterpart, the newly elected Rishi Sunak. As he entered the summit, Sunak greeted Prime Minister Modi with a namaste. That is the traditional Indian way of greeting someone with folded hands. The two leaders looked visibly happy to see each other. We wonder if they interacted in Hindi. But on a serious note, at a press conference after this bilateral, Sunak said that the UK was committed to a trade deal with India. But for it to go through, his government needs to get things right first. Exact words spoken. And shortly after that, Prime Minister Modi tweeted images from his interaction. He said, and I'm quoting, "India attaches great importance to robust ties. We discuss ways to increase commercial linkages, raise the scope of security cooperation in the context of India's defense reform, and make people-to-people ties even stronger." Interestingly, immediately after his meeting with Prime Minister Modi, Sunak greenlit 3,000 UK visas for Indians. The announcement was made in a tweet by the British Prime Minister's office. It said these visas will allow young Indian professionals to live and work in the UK for up to 2 years. And lastly, the biggest highlight from the summit was India taking over the G20 presidency from Indonesia. The images were striking. They showed the Indonesian president handing the chairmanship gavel to Prime Minister Modi, as the leaders in attendance broke into applause. India will officially assume charge from the 1st of December. The Prime Minister has called it a moment of great pride. He says, as the G20 chair, India will organize meetings in different Indian cities and make the organization a catalyst for global change. He's further added that the Indians will work to realize all aspects of the vision of one earth, one family and one future. Take a listen.
भारत G20 का जिम्मा ऐसे समय ले रहा है जब विश्व जियोपॉलिटिकल तनावों, आर्थिक मंदी, खाद्यान्न और ऊर्जा की बढ़ी हुई कीमतों और महामारी के दीर्घकालीन दुष्प्रभावों से एक साथ जूझ रहा है। ऐसे समय विश्व G20 की तरफ आशा की नजर से देखता है। आज मैं ये आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं कि भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता इंक्लूसिव, एम्बिशियस, डिसिसिव और एक्शन ओरिएंटेड होगी।
So at the end of the day, the war in Ukraine may have overshadowed this year's summit. It may have even been the most debated section of the G20 declaration. But there were also consequential outcomes in the form of bilateral deals and engagement, especially for India, which will now head this body of the world's 20 largest economies. Now, staying with the G20, this year's summit is generating headlines for more than one reason. Here is another one: Xi Jinping, who publicly confronted Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. What was the Chinese president angry about? Well, President Xi slammed Trudeau for allegedly leaking private details of a meeting to the press. And all this happened right when the cameras were rolling. You have to see it to believe it.
It is rare for world leaders to spar at multilateral forums in front of cameras. But at this year's G20 summit, the world witnessed an unprecedented clash. A Canadian video journalist caught Xi Jinping. This was miffed with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
If everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper, that's not appropriate.
The camera was now in the face of the two leaders. Xi Jinping could have held back, but he didn't.
And that's not how the conversation was conducted. If there is sincerity on your part,
Trudeau was in no mood to pull punches either.
Free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have to
Let's create the conditions first.
What was the Chinese president so angry about? Several reports claim that exchange was about this piece. It was published after Xi and Trudeau met on the sidelines at the G20 summit. Canadian intelligence suspects China meddled in the 2019 elections of Canada. Trudeau is said to have expressed his concerns about this. He later explained his side in both English and French.
I raised the issue of interference with our citizens and expressed that it's important that we continue to have dialogue about that.
Listen, I think that people know that not all the conversations are going to be easy with the other leaders, especially when it comes to issues that are sources of disagreement.
Canada's relationship with China has been particularly tricky for Trudeau to manage. He met with his Chinese counterpart after a gap of more than 3 years. The relationship hit rock bottom in 2018 with the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in Canada. It happened on the request of the United States. Meng was accused of bank and wire fraud. Washington wanted Canada to extradite her to the United States. China chose to respond by engaging in what many experts have termed as hostage diplomacy. Chinese authorities arrested two Canadian citizens, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. They were tried for spying. The feud ended in 2021. Canada released Meng Wanzhou, and Beijing sent back the two Michaels.
How are you feeling, Michael?
But the trust deficit still remains. Recently, Canada took a major decision against three Chinese firms on national security grounds. They were asked to divest their investments in critical mineral companies. Beijing was less than pleased.
The Chinese side urges the Canadian side to stop its unreasonable suppression of Chinese companies and provide a fair, just and non-discriminatory business environment for Chinese companies to operate normally in Canada. The Chinese government will continue to firmly safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of its domestic enterprises.
Xi Jinping's public confrontation with Trudeau confirms what many have said in the past. Ties between Canada and China remain sour, and the relationship might not improve anytime soon. Bureau Report, World is One.
Shifting our focus now to the United States. The midterm election is over, but a key player intends to keep his campaign going. I'm talking about former US President Donald Trump. The midterms brought him back into the spotlight, and Trump has no plans to stay away. Yesterday, he announced his campaign for the 2024 presidential election. Take a look.
We will make America safe again. We will make America glorious again. And we will make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you.
The slogan is the same, but this is not the same Trump. 8 years ago, he was the outsider. Today, Trump is a former president with a track record. He also lost his re-election bid. It is extremely rare for someone in Trump's position to announce a third presidential bid. But he wants to do it anyway. Some of the pillars of his re-election campaign remain the same, like tougher border policies and strong action against what he calls organized crime. Then what's different this time around? Well, Trump is calling his campaign a movement.
Our country is in a horrible state. We're in grave trouble. This is not a task for a politician or a conventional candidate. This is a task for a great movement that embodies the courage, confidence, and the spirit of the American people. This is a movement. This is not for any one individual.
You see, when he was in office, Trump was a quintessential strongman, the solution to all problems that America faces today. The deal maker in chief who will put America first. Not this time. With his pitch, Trump is reaching out to his core vote bank. He's making a simple appeal. He wants the voters to propel him to the top job again. But this time it won't be easy. For starters, the Republicans are not happy with him. The reason is the midterm result. Trump likes to project himself as a vote catcher, a vote winner. The numbers, however, paint a very different picture. Trump had backed 42 candidates in competitive races. Where there was a close fight between the Republicans and Democrats, 29 Trump-backed candidates lost. The results of 6 races are yet to be called. On 2 seats, there will be a runoff election. To put it simply, the Trump factor didn't work. Some Republicans are now openly calling him out. For instance, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is one of them. He used to be one of the key Trump supporters. After the midterms, he branded Trump as a serial loser. Here is what he said about him, I'm quoting. "The only winning that has been done since Donald Trump has been president is for Donald Trump." Trump's former vice president criticized him as well. Mike Pence now thinks there will be better choices for the 2024 race. A recent poll further exposes the reservations of the Republicans. 43% of them say they do not want Trump. They don't want Trump to run for president in 2024. There's another problem: Trump's legal woes. The former president is defending himself in a slew of cases. There is a criminal election tampering inquiry in Georgia, a civil fraud case that targets his business empire in New York, a defamation lawsuit linked to a sexual assault allegation, federal probes into his role in the Capitol attack, and of course, that huge controversy related to the handling of classified papers after he left office. The U.S. Justice Department is looking into that one. Listen in.
Former President Donald Trump has announced his intention to run for the White House again, and that brings fresh attention to a slew of Justice Department investigations that hover around him and his orbit as we speak. It's important to note that the Justice Department is fully permitted to investigate and indeed prosecute people who are running for office, including the office of president. So there is no reason in the near interim to expect that the Justice Department investigation will slow down in any way.
That probe will cast a shadow on Trump's campaign too. There's one more thing that might weigh on his mind. Trump's daughter Ivanka wants to stay away from politics. Just as Trump was announcing his bid, Ivanka released this statement. This is what she said. "I am choosing to prioritize my young children and the private life that we are creating as a family. I do not plan to be involved in politics." So will this impact Trump's presidential run? It's rather difficult to say at this point. Guess we'll all have to wait and watch how Trump's bid pans out. And our next story is about Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. He has landed himself in trouble once again. This time not for his rallies or remarks, but for his actions as Prime Minister. You all may recall the Toshakhana controversy. For the unversed, a Toshakhana is basically a state depository. It's a treasure house of sorts where gifts received by heads of states or prime ministers are kept. Imran Khan faces charges of misusing the Toshakhana. The accusations first emerged earlier this month, and now the controversy has exploded. All courtesy Omar Farooq Zahur, a Norwegian Pakistani millionaire who is currently based in Dubai. He says he has evidence to prove that Imran Khan misused Pakistan's treasure house. That's right. So what evidence? An expensive Graf wristwatch worth more than $2 million. This watch was gifted to Imran Khan by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But in 2019, Imran Khan's associates sold the watch to him. That's what he says. And not just the watch. Zahur says that he bought 3 other gifts that were given to Imran Khan, including a diamond ring, diamond cufflinks, and a rose gold pen set with diamonds. Next question. Who did this businessman buy the gifts from? From Farah Khan, aka Farah Gogi, a close aide of Imran Khan's wife, Bushra Bibi. A few months back, we did a report on her fleeing Pakistan immediately after Imran Khan was ousted. We had reported on how she may have left the country with expensive gifts given to Imran Khan. Turns out, the accusations weren't really far-fetched, only that this watch was sold way back in 2019. Listen to this now.
जी मैंने ये घड़ी जो है ये प्राइम मिनिस्टर इमरान खान को मिली थी सऊदी क्राउन प्रिंस से और ये जब सऊदी क्राउन प्रिंस विज़िट कर रहे थे तब वो उन्होंने लाके उनको दी तो ये सब्सिक्वेंटली गाड़ी फिर इन्होंने तोशाखाना में जमा करा दी और वहाँ से बाई बैक करके ये दुबई ले आए और दुबई में फिर मैंने इनसे ये गाड़ी ख़रीदी। उन्होंने कहा जी कि आपसे जो है फ़राग होगी, रब्ता करेंगी और जब दुबई पहुँचेंगी तो आप ज़रा अगर हो सके तो ज़रूर उनसे मिल लेना और देखना, अगर आपको पसंद हो तो आप ख़रीद लेना। तो वो फिर जब आई तो उन्होंने मुझे कॉल किया, वो मेरे दफ्तर आई, उन्होंने मुझे ये सेट दिखाया।
Now remember, the sale of state gifts received by Imran Khan has been a major sticking point in Pakistani politics. The country's election commission disqualified the PTI chief for allegedly making false statements and an incorrect declaration. It was only in September that Imran Khan admitted to having sold at least 4 presents, and now the man who bought them has come out with a tell-all account. But can he be believed? Absolutely not, says the PTI. They're pointing at his track record. Zahoor is said to be an influential businessman who was once wanted by security agencies in Norway, Switzerland, Turkey and Pakistan. He was accused of various financial frauds, but none of the allegations against him were proven to be true, and the cases were dropped. Yet, the PTI is using these accusations to discredit Zahoor's claims. They're calling him a liar and a criminal whose words cannot be believed. They're planning to take legal action against him. Now, speaking of legal action, the Pakistan government has taken one, and no, it's not aimed at Imran Khan. In fact, it's aimed at changing a law concerning the Pakistan Army. Allow me to explain. The government of Pakistan plans to bring some changes in the 1952 Pakistan Army Act. What sort of changes? And what are they aimed at? Well, as the headline on your screen indicates, Islamabad plans to make a legal tweak that will allow the Pakistani Prime Minister to retain any army officer with the stroke of a pen. Meaning, he will be able to appoint, reappoint or retain army officials at whim. The word I'd like to highlight is retain. The timing of this move is significant. It comes right ahead of General Qamar Javed Bajwa's retirement. He's set to retire as Pakistan's army chief on the 29th of this month. But the legal tweak may not be aimed at him. Analysts say it could be aimed at this man, Lieutenant General Asim Munir, the senior-most official for the post of Army Chief. Interestingly, he's set to retire a few days before General Bajwa, the 27th of November, to be precise. Now, if this legal tweak is made before his retirement, then Shehbaz Sharif could add a few more years to Asim Munir's career. Now, why would he do that? Because Munir is very close to the Sharif family and happens to be a vocal critic of Imran Khan, which is why they want him to be the army chief. In fact, reports say that in a few days from now, Shehbaz Sharif's office will formally approach Pakistan's defense authorities. This will be to initiate a process for the reappointment of 2 major posts, the Chief of Staff and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. Reports say the Pakistan government will not wait until the end of November for these appointments. So at the end of the day, this is what we have: a former Pakistani Prime Minister being exposed for selling state gifts, and a current Prime Minister discreetly trying to change the status quo. Some exciting days lie ahead of Pakistani politics. We'll keep a close watch. You know, they say it will take years before we can truly understand the impact of COVID-19. Well, we are still in the middle of the pandemic and we are looking at some very scary consequences of the pandemic. Take, for instance, this news from Europe. Experts are warning that Europe is now staring at a cancer epidemic, that the continent could have missed as many as 100 million cancer screenings in the last 2 years. 100 million. The obvious question is how? You see, ever since the pandemic struck, most healthcare resources have been deployed to combat COVID-19. And when I say resources, I mean doctors, nurses, researchers, basically every person working in medicine. In the last 2 years, COVID-19 has become their priority. and cancer patients have suffered because of this. Researchers say, and I quote, "There is emerging evidence that a higher proportion of patients are diagnosed with later cancer stages when compared with pre-pandemic rates as a result of substantial delays in cancer diagnosis and treatment." So how did researchers come to this conclusion? Through numbers. Clinicians saw 1.5 million fewer cancer patients in the first year of the pandemic. What's more, 1 in 2 cancer patients was not receiving surgery or even chemotherapy on time. At least 100 million screenings were missed. And experts say that some 1 million Europeans could now be living with undiagnosed cancer because of this. But the story is not limited to cancer, nor is it endemic to Europe. This pandemic is bad for healthcare in general. We all know this. Appointments were missed during the lockdown. Surgeries had to be cancelled. Some operations were tagged essential, others were put on the back seat. But who do you blame? We all know hospitals were stretched for resources. Lockdowns had limited the mobility of all healthcare professionals and patients. As early as 2021, dentists in America were raising an alarm about a dental health emergency. One report published in April last year found that 6 million American adults lost their dental insurance during the pandemic, and 10 million delayed getting care. Some because of costs, others because of a lack of infrastructure. And of course, a fear of exposure to the virus. In many cases, the consultations moved online, but clearly, many patients were left out, including mental health patients. On the 5th of October 2020, the World Health Organization put out this report. It said, the pandemic has disrupted or halted critical mental health services in 93% of countries. 67% of countries reported a disruption in counseling and in psychotherapy. 35% reported disruptions to access for medication for mental disorders. Guess what else suffered during the pandemic? Our eyes. Doctors in India say 90% of their patients saw some degree of vision. They saw some degree of vision during the first 2 waves of the pandemic lost. I'm sure you're wondering how. Well, doctors say it's because of poor follow-up. Patients missed taking critical injections. They had to skip their eye checkups. You see, in case of most of these illnesses or diseases, early detection is the key to controlling them. They say prevention is better than cure. So be it an eye disease, a dental problem, or cancer, you must have heard doctors say that the sooner we detect, the better it is. And this is where the pandemic became a hurdle. It came between the patients and their regular checkups. It came between doctors and early diagnosis. Right, it's time for some questions now. Do you own the latest set of headphones? Does it promise to drown out the noise? Does it boast of high-end features? How often do you put on your earphones, play your favorite track, and listen to it without a care in the world? Well, it's high time you start caring. Why am I saying this? Because more than 1 billion teenagers and young adults may be at the risk of a hearing loss, all because of their use of headphones, earphones, earbuds. Basically, because they're listening to loud, immersive music or sounds. This is what a new global study has found. Let that sink in. 1 billion young adults are at the risk of hearing loss because they're listening to music at unsafe levels. That's what this study says. And the villain of this story is known as a personal listening device, or PLD. What is it? Well, it's probably lying at an arm's reach for you right now. It could be your smartphone, your headphones, your earbuds, any device which you use regularly to answer calls, to consume content, or to listen to music. They're everywhere. and are being used by kids as young as 5. Just look around you. A colleague could be making a PPT with massive headphones on. Traveling in public transport, I bet the stranger next to you has earbuds on. And if you're on a flight, you're probably guilty of switching on your gadgets even before takeoff. Why listen to air safety instructions when you can listen to your favorite music? A parent in the seat next to you may have given their kid a set of headphones to avoid tantrums. My point is this: personal listening devices are everywhere, and they could be doing irreversible damage to your hearing. As technology takes over our lives, it's getting easier to drown out the noise. We have noise-cancelling devices too. The argument in their favor is that they block out external sound, so you don't have to keep increasing the volume of your headphones. So you could say that noise-cancelling devices may protect your hearing. But there's a price to pay. They're more expensive. And they won't protect your ears from sudden, loud, explosive sounds. Coming back to this study, researchers estimate that 24% of 12 to 34-year-olds are listening to their personal devices at unsafe levels. There's more. Have you seen your favorite artist perform live? Or visited a loud venue with booming sound, say a bar, a club, or even a cinema hall? Well, don't make it into a habit, because regular exposure to loud sounds or unsafe listening can cause permanent damage to your hearing. The study adds that damage from unsafe listening can increase over time and may make us more prone to age-related hearing loss too. While it's difficult to quantify what unsafe levels of listening are, let's tell you what's safe or what's considered safe. The US CDC limits safe noise levels at around 85 decibels over 40 hours a week. But let me tell you a fact: if you're listening to your favorite track on your smartphone right now, chances are the volume is much higher and it's above recommended levels. So what should you do? Should you throw away all your gadgets and hope that you wake up to the sound of birds chirping daily? Well, that's highly unlikely. We would say watch out for a few signs. Ringing ears? Turn it down. Can't hear your mom call out to you? Turn the volume down. Your device warning you about listening levels? Turn the volume down. Learn to switch off, else you may risk losing your hearing in the long run. And now let's take a look at what's making news around the world in Gravitas Global Headlines.
Iranian courts issue 3 more death sentences for violence linked to protests over Mahsa Amini's death, bringing the total to 5 death sentences in 3 days. Israel blames Iran for what it claims was a drone strike that hit a tanker operated by an Israeli-owned firm carrying gas and oil off the coast of Oman. British inflation jumps to a 41-year high on soaring energy and food bills in a worsening cost of living crisis. Consumer price index hits 11.1% in October. Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization chief warns that several major economies face a real risk of sliding into recession as the Ukraine war and its fallout cloud the global outlook. Actor Kevin Spacey will be charged with 7 further sex offenses, all against one man, piling on the pressure for one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The Bahamas unit of FTX, the now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange, seeks protection from creditors in the US under Chapter 15 of the Bankruptcy Code, allowing the debtor to shield their assets in the country. Flash floods in Australia swept away houses and cars in the town of Eugowra. Disaster management authorities described the deluge as a wall of water. And NASA launches the most powerful rocket ever built on a journey to the moon, marking the start of the space agency's new flagship program, Artemis. The third seed Casper Ruud becomes the first player to book a Final Four berth at ATP Finals with a 3-set win over Taylor Fritz. His win eliminated Rafael Nadal from the season-ending event and confirmed Carlos Alcaraz as the year-end world number 1. Sunrisers Hyderabad have parted ways with their captain and most expensive player Kane Williamson ahead of the IPL mini-auction in Kochi. The New Zealand skipper spent 8 years at the franchise and had a disappointing 2022 season after he was retained for $1.7 million.
And with that, it's a wrap on Gravitas tonight. Thanks for watching the show with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images.